Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Sankoré from Osprey Games. Sankoré is a 1-to-4 player Eurogame, and I'd argue this is definitely in the heavy Eurogame class. This is an interweaving combination of Euro mechanics, of area control, of a lot of in-your-face aspects, which is not as usually common in the Eurogame genre. I will not be doing a full overview of every single aspect of how this game plays. There's an absolute ton of things. There's 4 different area control sections on the board, all operating differently, but I'll try to give you a general sense of how the game plays, and then talk about my opinions, my thoughts, and all that, but this is going to be the furthest thing from a teach. The general idea of Sankoré is you're trying to score as many points as possible. That part's not a surprise. The first thing that's interesting about this game, though, is that points in this game are going to be variable. Effectively, throughout the course of the game, you're going to be gathering various tokens that look like this over here. These little tokens over here, let's try to find another few of these over here, or just grab a handful from off the side. These tokens over here are the various things you're trying to gather throughout the course of the game, because they're all worth points, but how many points each one is worth depends on this little track over here. You see, you're going to have this library track that throughout the course of the game, players are going to be spending books as a currency to do a variety of things, and depending on the various influence in these tracks, they're going to get more or fewer points for each of these things. So for example, just to give you an example right now in the top row, orange has the most books. Therefore, orange is getting 2 points to the top row. In the middle row over here, blue has the most with 1, 2, 3, 4. Orange has the second most with 2, which means orange gets 1 point for this row. And in this bottom row, we have 1, 2, 3 for light blue. And then purple is the leftmost from those that have 1, which means orange doesn't score here at all. So each orange is currently worth 3 points. 2 for the top row, 1 for the middle row. You evaluate each row independently, which means there's a total of 9 points to be given out amongst 4 colors. And so you can have a variety of distributions, including you can have colors being worth 0 points depending on how you stack that track, and you are going to be stacking that track. You are going to be influencing what exactly the currency of the points are worth, and you're going to be doing so based on what you're going for in the game, but also what you see your opponents going for. You see that one player who's managed to get an absolute ton of these orange pieces over here, well then try to make the orange score as few points as possible while drastically diversifying your choices to score other colors instead. There's a bit of a tug of war, a bit of a fight going on while you play through this Eurogame. But how do you get these? Well, that comes to the actions you take in the game. You see, in the game, you're going to be taking 2 actions every single turn. There's 5 possible actions. You're going to be taking 2. One of those actions is almost always going to be teaching a class, which is where we pull the next sideboard in over here. This teacher class over here is going to have you taking students and moving them up through the classes until they eventually get higher and higher and hopefully graduate, scoring you more points. But along the way, you're taking certain actions corresponding to these colors. You can take orange, light blue, purple, or dark blue actions. They actually have classes. They have astronomy, law, theology, they have all these names for them, but for the sake of teaching it, it's easier to reference the colors. So you're going to be teaching classes. So a very common action you take in the game is the action of moving a student up through the class, taking a class with that color, gaining a bonus if you match the color to the student. So for example, over here, if this purple student takes that orange class, well, they get to take the class nonetheless. But if the orange student takes the orange class, they'll get an additional bonus for being an orange student in the orange class. So you're trying to make that work, but you'll see as you go up the ranks over here, you're going to have to make trade-offs as you play. But taking an action in a class is going to affect these 4 area control regions. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here. Each of these operating differently, and each of you giving them an opportunity to earn both the currencies of the game, whether the salt, whether the gold, whether the books themselves. You're trying to earn the currency of the game from the regions, but you're also trying to earn all these little tokens over here because they're worth points. Which ones you go for will depend on what the scoring track is looking like. And so there's a bit of an interweaving mechanism going on here. But you're going to complement that main action. It's not really a main action because you don't have to take it, but I'll say from multiple games of playing through this, I don't know if I've ever seen a main action like that not taken. The teacher class action seems to always be taken. I'm sure there's times where it's not optimal to do so, but that's going to be one of the core actions you'll take. And we'll come back to that in a second. The other actions you can take are going to be learning new classes. So for example, over here, you'll notice I don't yet have a level 4 class over here. I can learn a class as an action. That's one option. I can recruit new students as an action, pulling them from various tracks over here, taking new students and starting them off in any of my intro classes so they can move up to the ranks. That's going to be action number 2. You can go ahead and get a favor over here, action number 3. That's going to be one of the ways of circumventing the core loops of the game, because favors give you absolutely everything, but they do so at the cost of clogging up your tracks. You'll notice I'm pulling in tons of boards over here because this game is a table hog. So over here we have, and this one has to be held like this, you'll see why in a second, but over here I think I've already messed it up. This is not really a dual layered board. It's kind of a, we got things going on here. But down over here, you're going to be storing your tokens that you earn in this board over here, but you block them up every time you take a favor. So you want to be mindful of taking favors. You can get rid of those, but you do so by taking another favor. So we have favors, learning new classes, getting new students, and then the last extra action is going to be graduating students. In the course of the game, you're going to have these graduation tiles over here, and as your students climb higher up these tracks, you're going to have the option of graduating them, which in return will give you tokens of that color. So remember how, blue might be worth 3 points? Well, if you get this, that effectively counts as 3 blue, or 9 points if you can get it that high. You may be able to get it higher. Maybe blue's going to be worth 4 points in the game, and that'll be 12 points from that one tile right there. So you're graduating students, you're getting new students, you're learning new classes, you're taking favors, and then that main action is going to be teaching a class where you take one of the core for area control regions on the board. And this is where it gets progressively harder to teach this game the more I talk, because there's so much going on here. There's so much nuance to how things operate. But basically, when you teach a class, you're going to teach a class, getting the benefit of that action, getting a bonus if that action has the students of the right color, activating the gears on the side. Throughout the course of the game, you're going to have the opportunity to layer up these sideboards with extra bonuses. And if I take an action over here, I'll get these 2 bonuses because I further layered that action. So there's additional levels of bonuses you're taking. And then each of the actions you take has the opportunity of getting some of your buildings into these regions on the board. That's the wrong spot over here. Into these regions on the board, getting the bonus of that region, but also having an area control aspect to it, because you're going to score bonuses, both in currencies, books, as well as in points at the end of, 2 scoring phases throughout the course of the game. So you're going for the regions to be able to get things from the regions, to be able to get scoring benefits from the regions, and you're trying to layer and time it all out. So for example, and again, core, I'm skipping so many different things over here, but for example, over here, you're primarily going to be getting books as well as some extra scoring benefits. Over here, you're getting a lot of area control over these walls, which will give you in-game and end-game scoring. Everything is going to give you in-game and end-game scoring. Over here, you're getting a ton of abilities. This is going to be the main way you layer up those sideboards of your tableau in order to get extra bonus actions. And over here, you're going to be constantly trading in, you're going to be trading in gold to get salt at these various outposts. In this region, you're getting gold from the city itself. In this region, you're spending salt to get these bonuses. Everything has ways you spend stuff in order to be able to get things, and you're trying to be mindful of the loop of, the loop is effectively books over here, gold over here, books over here, gold over here, salt over here, and books over here, in a little trifecta, with this being the extra actions you can take that give you a lot of ways to circumvent that in addition to the favors. The favors and this bonus region over here are the main ways you kind of circumvent and break that core action loop. Whenever you go ahead and remove students from these boards, you're going to trigger various benefits. You're going to trigger a mid-game scoring, where you're going to get books from the various regions, depending on your area of control, and you're going to have an end-game scoring, where you're going to trigger getting the actual tokens themselves from the regions, again, for those actual points in the game. There is so many things that I am not getting into, but I think that's a kind of general overview. You're trying to get points in the game. You're going to go to all these regions to get these various tokens. The value of those tokens is going to range depending on how you put and donate books into the library. As you go ahead and graduate students, as you learn new classes, as you go to this region over here, you'll be spending and donating books that will all go into the library, which means you have a lot of agency and control over how the library develops, both to help you and to hurt your opponents, and I'll get that piece that I just dropped later. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review. There are so many elements I did not touch upon. Usually my reviews do have a fairly decent teach in them. Well, decent's a relative term, but a fairly somewhat comprehensive. There's so many things to get into, although let's go ahead and talk about that, because first of all, ease of play over here. The ease of play of Sankoré is not great in my opinion. Really, really not great, to the point that I debated taking this game to review in the first place, but then secondly, when I started diving into it, I was halfway through the rules, and I was ready to give up on this one. I was just, some games aren't worth it. There are so many great games that come out every year that halfway through the rules in this one, I was just like, you know what? I don't need to be here. I don't need to be learning this game. I could be playing any one of the dozens of great games I've learned and found this year already. I don't need to be going through this, 0.8 type font size, whatever it is, trying to get tons of information. The setup alone is just a homework assignment beyond homework assignment. The actual rules are not the most complicated to teach, but a lot to learn. Like, I think I can get you up and running on this game in maybe 25 minutes, maybe, but I think that first time rulebook learning is probably a minimum of an hour and a half. For the person learning this game, you're looking at a minimum of an hour and a half, and that's with the game set up in front of you, really trying to understand it. I think there's a lot going on here, and there's tons of nuances as far as, there's rules for this game that I know are rules, and I've gone through the rulebook multiple times and I still haven't found them. And I know the rules because I saw the iconography and I managed to find these scoring examples that illustrate that I'm right, but I still can't find the actual rule in the rulebook, and I don't know if I'm just missing it, but I know it's a rule, I know it's there, I know I'm right, but I can't find it anything outside the scoring. There's still, the rulebook is just, I don't know if the rulebook could have done better. I think this game is complicated to teach, but it is not an easy teach. It's not easy to set up. It's not like once you know this game, like once you play this game a bunch of times, you can probably get the setup down to 20 minutes. Probably, if you're playing. If you're doing it with other people, maybe a little faster, but I would say getting it down to 20 minutes from a first time setup, you're probably looking at 45 minutes to an hour for that first time setup. This game is a lot in terms of the barriers to entry. There's just a lot in the way here. As far as the game time itself is not bad. I'd say you're looking at 90 minutes to 120 minutes for the game. That will depend on player count, it will depend on how thinky you are, it will depend on whether you're pushing more endgame or not, but I'd say in that 90 to 120 minute range as far as the game itself. But the setup and the table space, I mean, you probably saw from the fact that I have this giant center board, and then every player has their own multiple sideboards, and then you have the library board. We also have a smorgasbord of tiles of setup for the classes. This is definitely a table hog, not the worst I've seen, but certainly a lot in the way. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, and here's the good news, because I know I just spent 4 minutes talking about how this game is not the most accessible, but now let me tell you all the reasons why this game is absolutely delightful, and I'm so glad that I persevered through that rules, through that rule book, through the teach, through everything to get to this, because this is one of the better Euro games I have played in a long time, and this year has already been a good year for finding Euro games for my collection. Between Expeditions, between Apiary, between Wayfarers of the South Tigris, between Revive, there have been a bunch of Evenfall. There's been so many Euros I've discovered this year that have really done a good job reminding me of why I like Euro games. I like so many genres, but Euro games can have such elegance and delight to them, and Sankoré is doing an excellent job continuing to just remind me that great games continue to come out. Great games continue to exist. There are so many things to consider as you play this, and the way everything interweaves together, it is incredibly elegant, and everything has a lever you can push in the game in order to get the action you want. Every region has a different way that I'll score. Every bonus there is has a different way that I'll augment the game. The fact that this game is basically an area control Euro game gives you a lot of things to consider, and it is a mean and tight area control. A big part of the game is the fact that at any given point, you're going to have 5 or 6 actions that are all compelling, that are all amazing, 5 or 6 different ways, because sure, you only have 5 core actions, but the type of action versus the ways you can take that action are totally different. You're going to have so many different compelling aspects of the things you want to do, and the reason that's so good for you, and the reason that if you don't take that, somebody else is going to take it, and you're going to be both helping yourself and denying them. The problem is you have that puzzle and dilemma with multiple things every single turn, and so you both have the reward of having incredibly cool, satisfying, fun turns, but the challenge of just trying to figure out which one is the right one to take. Which bonus is the right one in order to take this, and you always want to do that in order to get there. You want to go ahead and get those augments so you can go ahead and take stronger actions, but if you get the bonus tiles from this region, then you can get even stronger actions from there. Meanwhile, you're trying to get in over here because you'll start getting more points as you trigger the area control scoring. You also want to move up this track over here. Some of these top bonuses over here are incredibly satisfying. There are so many intricate things going on as far as the way things cascade together. You are constantly forced to examine how you want to approach this puzzle. And the end game scoring, the fact that it's not just area control in the game, you have 4 different area control regions you're fighting over, but the fact that the timing of the game, the timing is such a big factor because the players have the agency to trigger when those scorings happen, which means as you take actions, you have to realize not just how you're helping yourself, but how you're setting up the next players to take actions that will help or hurt them, but you also have to take advantage of those actions to help or hurt, well, help yourself and hurt others as you go. And then there's the library scoring. The fact that you're not just doing this intricate puzzle with so many different ways that it weaves together, but you're also influencing the entire nature of how everything scores in the game makes this one of the most interactive Euro games I've played in a long time as far as how it both feels like an incredibly brain-burnery optimization puzzle of your own design, but how also everything interweaves with other players and every single action cascades into how it's going to affect yourself and others. It is one of the most interactive Euros of this type of Euro that I've played in a very, very long time, and that makes it just a rewarding, compelling puzzle. I haven't even talked about the fact that you start with certain bonus cards. You're going to start with a variety of bonus cards in the game that all give you a way of scoring that bonus card, and then once you have that, it gives you something else you can do in the game, either once per round, an ongoing benefit when you take an action, and also endgame scoring as well, because if you get those, you're you're going to have more points in whatever color that is. And so you're dealing with, again, one more aspect of what to consider as you play. Where do you try to take advantage of those bonus cards? Which ones will combine nicely to be able to help out your engine further to augment what you're already doing? There's just so many things going on, and there's a core optimization, there's a core resource loop in the game that you have to be mindful of, because you need gold to go to these regions to get salt, you need salt to go ahead to go to these regions, you need books to go ahead and go to this region. So there's a little puzzle of how these regions interweave between each other, and that makes it seem almost forced, except there's ways to break that, and I like the fact that there's ways to break that. You're going to have your favors over here that give you all the resources, letting you circumvent any one core loop. The last game I had of a Sankoré, I didn't touch this region at all, which is the first time I played this in which I didn't go to a region once the entire game. Usually I have regions that I focus on, but this is the first time I completely ignored a region. To be fair, it's the lowest scoring game I've had, but that's neither here nor there. But additionally, you're going to have these points over here, as far as how these give you additional tiles to put onto your sideboard, which will again give you ways to get gold, to get salt, to get other rewards or favors or books. And so you have so many ways of circumventing a pre-scripted loop. I don't mind pre-scripted loops as long as they don't force me to engage in those loops too much, because if you give me a pathway I have to follow, where's my agency? If you give me a pathway and then ways to take shortcuts or off the beaten road, that's going to give you a whole different puzzle to face with, and Sankoré has that through and through in the very nature of every single aspect of its design. It is variable in the setup, it's variable in the way you can add action tiles, it's variable in the way you're going to have different bonus cards, and the intricacies of every single thing you do in the game. And again, I can't go into every nuance because there's so many rules, small stuff that I haven't talked about, as far as where you graduate students, how you move people through a class, or how you can spend extra tokens to be able to upgrade students, to jump classes, to transition from class to class within the same road. There's so many ways you can push the envelope in this game, and because of that end game scoring, it's not about getting the most, it's about getting the right things in this game. It's rewarding. It's a rewarding experience. I just spent a long time telling you why it's a rewarding experience. It's a very, very rewarding experience. As far as things I don't like about the game, first of all, the rules and the fact that it's such a burden to get this game off the ground. And again, I think it's more of an initial load, because the setup is going to be a factor. The setup, if you have people who know how to play, it's one thing, but if you're doing it yourself, even after you know the game, you're looking at 20 minutes for a 90 to 120 minute game, which is not a small amount of time. It's certainly something to be mindful of. I would say the initial rules overload is a lot, but teaching it to other people once you know it is not as bad. It's still a lot, but it's not as bad. But more importantly, this game is rewarding enough that it's worth it. For me, rules teaches setup. Those are things that are barriers to when a game is not good enough, but Sankoré is good enough. So those are factors. There are things I don't like. They do get in the way, but I can get over them. I will say that you do find sometimes in this game that turns can be very head down. Meaning you can start to get to a point where someone's taking a long, involved turn, and you just don't need to be there for that. And you might spend 5 minutes, 6 minutes waiting for your turn to come back around, possibly longer. If you're playing a 4-player game, you might find yourself in like a 7-minute loop towards the end game when the turns start getting extra crunchy, and that can happen. And so you can start planning around your turn, but if you already know what you're doing, you might find yourself starting to fall behind. So the AP aspect, the slightly heads down, the game itself is not heads down. The game itself involves so much interaction between the players and how their actions affect each other. But at the end of the day, if you're taking a 7-minute long turn, I just don't need to be there for that, and that can happen in this game. And then I'll also complain about the player boards. I tried showing you the player board over here, but this player board, which, if you move this at all, this is not a recessed double-layered player board. This is a player board that has holes in it, which means if you mess it up at all, you kind of have to reset it or whatnot. There's no memory aspect to it. You don't have to remember where things go, but I wish the player boards were a bit better, and that includes the main board over here. You have these modifiers for 2 or 3-player games, or what's printed on the board, but they warp pretty quickly and they don't sit smoothly, so some small component issues in an otherwise beautiful game with otherwise great components. There are some small nitpicks in the way. As far as what I can see others not liking, this is a brain-burnery game, make no mistake. There are so many ways that your actions interweave. You have to be prepared for not just a game that forces you to examine every single action, but also gives you the urgency of having to deal with other players and how their actions affect you and how your actions affect them. This is a very brain-burner experience. Like I said already, I would definitely put this in the heavy Euro class, not a midweight Euro. I think there's so much going on here in this game. And also, there's always someone trying to get one over you. This is not a polite Eurogame where players do their own thing. This is a Eurogame where you charge optimistically towards a whole bunch of orange Sankorés in the game, and meanwhile, the other players go ahead, realize you have some points, and start tanking the value of the orange books, making it so that all that stuff you worked very hard towards is now worth 1 point apiece, while they have 3 or 4 tokens that are worth 3 or 4 points apiece, and they get more points because they played a better, smarter game. This is a very aggressive game for a Euro. This is a very in-your-face game for a Euro. You kind of have to be okay with that. If you're looking for a you're looking for a polite Euro where you do your own thing as best as possible, this is not that game. There's a lot of interaction going on here, for better or for worse. As far as final thoughts on Sankoré, I really like this game. I started off, but once I had the game learned, once I was ready to go, I sat down, I taught it, I got ready to go, and I expected this to be one of those games where I play it, but it's just not worth it. And I've had many games like that. I've had many games that are great games, but sometimes they're not worth it. They're not worth the setup. They're not worth the teach. They're not worth the rules learning. They're not worth remembering the rules. Even if they are good games, sometimes a good game still isn't worth the complexity you put me through to get there. And I assumed Sankoré would fall into that camp. Not that it's a bad game. I saw the puzzle. I was intrigued by it, but I just thought it wouldn't be worth it. But then I played it, and I thought it was incredible. And so I immediately wanted to play it again and again and again. This is a delightful experience. This is a delightful... It's so satisfying. Every single thing you do is rewarding for yourself. Every single thing you do sets up the opponent for something else, which means just the same puzzle, the same challenge I get out of drafting. When I play drafting games, my favorite mechanic is drafting, because very often you're looking at a hand of cards and you're both choosing between the way you're going to help yourself, but also the way you're going to help your opponent and or block your opponent. And that urgency between how I'm affecting myself and how I'm affecting other players makes drafting such a good mechanic when it's done well. And Sankoré does that with the entire game. Every action you do is that puzzle. Every single time you look at the board, you are faced with multiple choices, and you have to choose what's good for you and how are you about to set up your opponent for better or for worse. This is an incredibly rewarding experience. To me, this is a 5 out of 5. It is possibly the best Euro game I've played this year. Give me some more time before I officially announce that, but possibly the best Euro game I've played this year. I think Sankoré is absolutely excellent. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you're looking for another game that's themed around education and books and trading things in, Alma Mater is going to be another one that's in that same category. For me, I think that Alma Mater was very rewarding, but felt too long for the game experience I got out of it. Sankoré, to me, kind of feels like it does that theme better. The mechanics are totally different, but the theme does better for me. And additionally, if you're looking for the previous game to this series, the previous in the Osprey series, we have Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road. The color palette may be familiar to you. Again, for me, I prefer Sankoré personally, but Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road is also a delightful experience as well, that also had some degrees. They actually have a small elements of the puzzle in this little wall section, while being a very, very different game. Same company, same designers, or one of the same designers. That's going to be Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.